You're 16 years old and sitting in the stands at an airshow somewhere in the American Midwest. The sky above you is empty, but suddenly it's not. A fighter jet flies over the tree line at 500 miles per hour, and the sound reaches you half a second after the jet itself. Your chest tightens. Your field of vision narrows. For a full second, you completely forget to breathe. The person next to you covers their ears and turns away. You, however, lean forward with your mouth agape because something has just happened to you that you cannot yet put into words. The aircraft pulls straight up and vanishes into the blue and leaves a white scar across the sky that starts dissolving before you can fully look at it. And you sit there staring at the place where it was, and you know, with a certainty that feels more like memory than ambition, that you are going to fly one of those. Not want to, not hope to, going to. The decision is made before your brain finishes processing what your eyes just saw. You go home and you put a poster on your wall and you start researching, and the research tells you things that would stop most people. The acceptance rate for Air Force pilot training is under 3%. You need a college degree. You need perfect vision or correctable to 20/20. You need to score in the top percentile on the Air Force officer qualifying test. You need to survive a selection process that eliminates candidates for reasons that are never fully explained to the candidates being eliminated. You read all of this sitting on your bed with the poster watching you from across the room, and you do not feel discouraged. You feel something closer to clarification. The difficulty is not a warning. The difficulty is a filter. Most people read a filter as a stop sign. You read it as a description of what comes next. You intend to be one of the things that gets through it. You are not certain yet how. You are certain that you will. There is a difference between those two things, and at 16, you already understand the difference even if you cannot fully articulate it yet. The poster stays on the wall. You look at it every morning before school and every night before sleep. Every morning, it asks you the same question. Every morning, you give it the same answer. You do not write it down. You do not tell anyone. You do not need to. The answer is already the organizing principle of everything you are about to do. You are 20 years old and you are at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, or you are in ROTC at a state university, or you have taken the enlisted route and are working your way toward an officer training school application. In any of these cases, you are doing the same fundamental thing, which is proving yourself worthy of a slot that almost nobody receives. The academy sits at 7,000 feet of elevation, and the thin air is the first thing that humbles you. Not dramatically, not with a single moment of collapse, but steadily, incrementally, the way altitude always works, by making everything cost more than it should. You run in it, and your lungs burn in ways they never burned at sea level. You do push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups and formations before the sun comes up, in cold that makes the metal equipment painful to touch. You study aeronautics and physics and military history and leadership theory, and you carry a course load that would be considered brutal at a civilian university while simultaneously maintaining a military bearing. That means your shoes are always shined, and your uniform is always pressed, and your room is always inspection ready, regardless of how little sleep you got the night before. The academic pressure is relentless, and the military pressure sits on top of it like a second atmosphere pushing down. Upperclassmen who went through exactly what you are going through look at you without sympathy, because sympathy is not what this process is designed to produce. What it is designed to produce is performance under conditions that would cause a reasonable person to stop. You do not stop. You apply for a pilot slot in your junior year. There are 200 cadets competing for 40 slots. The selection committee looks at your grades and your fitness scores and your leadership evaluations and your AFOQT results. And they look at something harder to quantify, which is whether you have the specific combination of aggression and discipline and spatial reasoning and calm under pressure that produces a fighter pilot rather than a cargo pilot or a tanker pilot. all of which are honorable careers and none of which are what you want. The call comes on a Tuesday afternoon in your junior year. You have been selected for pilot training with a fighter track. You call your parents immediately. Your mother answers. Your voice breaks on the second sentence, and you are embarrassed about that for approximately 30 seconds. And then you decide you are not embarrassed about it at all, because the thing that broke your voice is real, and it has been building for 4 years, and it deserves the space it takes up. You report to undergraduate pilot training at a base in Texas or Oklahoma or Mississippi, and for the next 52 weeks, this base is your entire world. Everything outside the base is theory. Everything inside it is real. You fly the T-6 Texan II first, a single-engine turboprop that is faster and more responsive than anything you have touched before. You sit in the cockpit for the first time with an instructor behind you, and the aircraft feels alive in a way that simulators never manage to replicate. The controls respond to pressure you barely applied. The aircraft wants to fly. Your job in the beginning is to not interfere with that too badly. You learn contact flying, basic aerobatics, instrument procedures, formation flying, night flying. You fly cross-country routes to bases you have never visited, and you navigate with instruments alone in clouds so thick the wingtip disappears, and you hold your heading and trust your training and come out the other side on course. You solo after a handful of dual flights, and the silence in the cockpit without your instructor is the loudest thing you have ever experienced. Every mistake is yours now. Every correction is yours. Every good decision is yours too, but it is the mistakes that you feel most clearly, the ones that the debriefs will reconstruct in detail in front of people whose opinion of you matters. The T-6 phase ends, and you move to the T-38 Talon, a supersonic jet trainer that is faster and less forgiving and more beautiful than anything you have flown. The cockpit is narrow. The aircraft is narrow. The margins are narrow. The first time you push the T-38 through Mach 1, you watch the airspeed indicator cross that number and you feel nothing external. The aircraft does not shake. The sky does not change color. The world outside looks exactly as it did below the speed of sound, but something internal shifts that does not shift back. You are now a person who has gone faster than sound travels, and that is a category you will belong to for the rest of your life. The training eliminates students throughout the year. A bad check ride. A pattern of errors the instructors call a trend. A medical issue that surfaces under the physical demands of sustained G-forces. The blood draining from your brain and pooling in your legs with every hard turn. You watch classmates leave and you feel something complicated about it. Not relief exactly, not guilt exactly, something in between that has no name and that you carry quietly. You graduate in the top third of your class. That ranking earns you a fighter assignment, a specific aircraft, a specific base, a specific future that has just stopped being abstract. You are 23 years old and you are in the F-16 Fighting Falcon or the F-15 Eagle or the F-22 Raptor or the A-10 Thunderbolt II, and you are going through your aircraft-specific training. And the difference between this and everything that came before it is the difference between studying a language in a classroom and being dropped into the country where they speak it with no dictionary and no time to think. The aircraft is complex in ways that take years to fully understand. Not months, years. You learn the systems one by one. The radar, the weapons, the electronic warfare suite, the engine limitations and the things you must never do to an engine if you want to come home. The emergency procedures that must be executed from memory in seconds because at 500 knots, 200 feet above the ground, there's no time to consult a checklist and no margin for the pause that consulting one requires. You fly your first supersonic low-level route through a canyon system in Nevada, and the walls of the canyon are closer than the wingspan, and the ground below you is a blur, and you are pulling G-forces through the turns, and your body weighs 600 pounds, and your vision grays at the edges and narrows toward a tunnel, and you are operating at the absolute outer limit of what a human body can sustain, and the aircraft, and you are the same thing in those moments. One system, one decision unit, moving through space at a speed that does not allow for second thoughts or hesitation or the luxury of being wrong. You are the most junior pilot in your squadron. That means you fly the wing position. You stay in formation. You follow. You learn. You do not deviate from what your flight lead tells you unless the situation changes in a way that demands immediate independent action. And even then, you communicate immediately and clearly, because the cardinal rule of formation flying is that everyone always knows where everyone else is and what everyone else intends to do. You debrief every flight for as long as the flight lasted, sometimes longer. Every mistake is examined in a room full of people who are better than you at this and who will not pretend otherwise. You do not want them to pretend otherwise. The pretense would cost you more than the honesty does. You are 26 and you are on your first deployment, a base in the Middle East or the Pacific or Europe, depending on where the mission requires you to be. And the flying changes when it is real. Not because the physics are different. Physics do not change based on whether the target below you is a training range or a compound in a city. The physics are identical. What changes is the weight of the decisions. In training, if you make an error, you debrief it and learn from it and fly again tomorrow. In combat, if you make an error, people die. Either the people you were sent to protect, or the people in the aircraft with you, or civilians who had no stake in the conflict and no knowledge it was coming. That is the weight that sits in the seat next to you on every sortie. It does not announce itself. It does not interfere with your hands or your scan or your radio calls. But it is there. You fly close air support missions for troops on the ground who are calling for help in voices that are sometimes calm and sometimes not. You fly combat air patrols and combat strikes and escort missions and missions whose purpose is classified above your clearance level, so you execute what you are told and ask no questions that cannot be answered in this context. The first time you employ a weapon in combat, the training takes over completely, the way training is supposed to. Your hands do exactly what they were trained to do. Your voice is calm on the radio. The target disappears. You egress the area. You return to base. You debrief. You go to the dining facility and eat something hot and go back to your room and lie on your bunk and stare at the ceiling and feel something that is not guilt and not pride and not relief, but that contains elements of all three in a ratio that shifts every time you try to examine it. There is no name for this feeling in any language you have been taught. You carry it anyway. You fly combat missions for 6 months and then the deployment ends and you fly home and your family is at the arrival ceremony on the ramp and your mother holds you longer than she usually does and you let her. You let her because some part of you needs to be held by someone who knew you before any of this existed. You are 29 and you have been upgraded to flight lead. You are now the one who makes the decisions and the wingmen are the ones who follow them. The upgrade required a formal evaluation and a board of senior pilots who asked you questions about tactics and threat systems and rules of engagement and weapons employment until they were satisfied that you could be trusted with other people's lives in complex airspace at high speed. You plan the missions now. You brief the force ship. You walk your wingmen through the threat environment and the game plan and the contingencies and the abort criteria, and you answer their questions because their questions are the same ones you used to ask, and you remember which answers actually helped you and which ones were technically correct but tactically useless. You lead your first force ship through a low-level training route, and the weight of having 3 other aircraft behind you following your every input is a different pressure than flying alone. You are not just flying your own jet, you are flying their jets too. Every input you make becomes 3 more inputs from aircraft that are trusting your lead. You think 2 moves ahead at all times because a decision takes 3 seconds to execute, and in those 3 seconds, the world changes. You have an incident on a training mission, a near mid-air collision in the brake pattern at your home base. You are the flight lead. The debrief is brutal in the specific way that only military aviation debriefs can be brutal, which is precise and relentless and conducted in front of everyone who was flying that day. You sit across from the squadron commander and the director of operations, and you go through every decision you made, every radio call you gave, every moment where a different choice would have produced a different outcome. You are honest because dishonesty in a debrief is the most dangerous thing a pilot can do. Not dangerous to your career, dangerous to every pilot who flies after you in the conditions you failed to accurately report. The incident is logged and investigated. No one is formally disciplined because the investigation determines it was a combination of factors rather than a single error in judgment. But you replay it anyway. You replay it for months. Late at night, when the base is quiet and the flight line is dark, you reconstruct it in your head and you find new details each time, and you do not stop finding them until the details stop changing, and you are certain you have extracted everything there is to learn. You are 33, and the squadron has selected you to become an instructor pilot, the IP. And you understand now, sitting in the left seat or the front seat with a student behind you or beside you, what your instructors understood about you when you were in that position. The student in front of you is not learning to fly the aircraft. The aircraft is the straightforward part. What they are learning is to think under pressure, to process multiple streams of information simultaneously and extract the one that matters most and act on it without freezing, without second guessing, without the hesitation that in this environment is not caution but danger. That is a thing you can teach, but only by creating the pressure and watching what happens inside it and intervening at exactly the right moment. Not too early, because early intervention teaches the student that someone will always catch them, and they never develop the internal mechanism that catches themselves. Not too late, because late intervention in a jet moving this fast at this altitude does not produce a lesson. It produces a report. You have a student named Marcus who is technically precise, whose hands are good, whose instrument scan is clean, but his decision speed is too slow. The processing is not where it needs to be yet. You fly with him for weeks, and you find the specific exercises that compress his decision cycle, the scenarios that force him to commit before he feels ready, and you watch him improve in increments too small to celebrate individually, and then one day, you fly a demanding low-level route together, and he leads it. And every call is made on time, and every turn is executed correctly, and you say nothing exceptional in the debrief, because the debrief reflects a flight that needed no exception. He passes his flight lead upgrade 3 months later. You feel something that is different from what you felt on your own upgrades. It is quieter. It is more durable. It does not fade the way your own milestones faded once the next challenge appeared. You are shaping the people who will fly these aircraft in the next conflict in the next decade, and you do not know what that conflict will be, or where it will happen, or whether what you taught Marcus will be the specific thing that keeps him alive in it. You teach anyway. You teach everything you know and several things you cannot name but only demonstrate. You are 36, and you have been selected for the United States Air Force Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. The Weapons School is the graduate school of air combat. 6 months of the most demanding tactical training that exists anywhere on this planet, run by the people who are currently considered the best tactical minds in American air power. The acceptance rate makes pilot training look accessible. You go through it. The first month is an exercise in systematic humiliation conducted by people who are better than you at the thing you have spent your entire adult life becoming good at. And the humiliation is not personal. It is structural. It is the method, because you cannot improve what you are not willing to acknowledge is imperfect. And the weapons school is not interested in what you already know. It is interested in the distance between what you currently know and what is tactically possible. and in making that distance visible to you so precisely that you cannot pretend it is smaller than it is. You close that distance by 6 months of flying that is unlike anything that came before. You graduate. The small patch they put on your flight suit is called simply the patch. And in the fighter community, in the specific world you have lived in for over a decade, it means something that requires no further explanation to anyone who belongs to that world. You return to your unit as a weapons officer, the tactical conscience of the squadron. You write the tactics manuals. You design the training programs. You represent your aircraft and your unit at joint exercises with other services and other nations. You are the person in the room who has thought longest and hardest about how to fight in the air and win and bring people home. The knowledge sits inside you like a second skeleton, structural, invisible, load-bearing. You are 40 and you have been selected to command a fighter squadron, 24 aircraft, 300 people. The full weight of their readiness and their welfare and their performance falls on you, and there is no redistributing that weight. The desk takes hours that used to belong to the cockpit. You manage budgets and personnel problems and maintenance issues that ground aircraft that are supposed to be flying, and the politics of a large military installation that does not stop being political simply because you wish it would. You do all of this while trying to remain a credible aviator, which means flying enough to stay current, which means flying with your youngest pilots so they know that you understand what they are doing from the inside rather than from a briefing. You lose a pilot in a training accident in your second year of command. His name is Lieutenant Daniel Reyes. He is 27 years old. He has a wife named Sophia and an infant daughter named Lucia, who was born 4 months ago. The accident investigation takes 6 months, during which you attend every session and review every piece of data and ask every question that the data does not already answer. Not because you're required to, but because Daniel Reyes flew for you, and his family deserves someone who understands exactly what happened. You write the letter to Sophia yourself. You sit at your desk for 3 hours writing it and rewriting it, because nothing you write feels equal to what it needs to carry, and you send it anyway, because she deserves something even if nothing is enough. You speak at his memorial service and you hold everything together in public, because the squadron is watching you, and what they see you do with grief will shape how they carry their own losses in the years ahead. You carry yours alone. Late at night in the office, with the door closed, you sit in the dark and let it be as heavy as it actually is, and then you close the door behind you when you leave, and you carry it differently in the morning, because you have to, and because Daniel Reyes would expect you to. You are 55 years old, and you have flown for over 30 years and accumulated more than 3,000 hours in fighter aircraft, and you have done things in the sky that will never appear in any public record, and led people through situations that tested every limit of human performance, and you are done now. The physical requirements of high G flight have a biological ceiling, and you have reached it honestly, which is more than some people manage. Your last flight is in an F-16 over the Nevada desert on a Tuesday morning, and you plan it the way you plan every flight, with full attention and full preparation. But you also allow yourself something you have not allowed in 30 years of professional flying, which is to feel it while it is happening, instead of only analyzing it. You go supersonic one final time, and you feel the airspeed cross Mach 1, and you remember the first time you crossed that number in a T-38 over Texas, and the instructor behind you said nothing, because nothing needed to be said, and you note the distance between who you were in that cockpit and who you are in this one. The distance measured not in years, but in everything that happened inside all of them. You pull a 9G turn that pushes up blood from your brain, and you hold it and release it and roll wings level, and you breathe, and you are still here. You do a roll at altitude where the earth rotates around you instead of the other way, and the desert and the mountains and the empty blue all spin past the canopy in a slow arc, and you hold the roll and feel it completely. You land and taxi in, and the ground crew is waiting on the ramp, and they spray you with water, which is the tradition for a final flight, a pilot's last landing, and you stand on the ramp soaking wet in a flight suit you have worn in some version for 3 decades, and you look at the aircraft and you say nothing, and the aircraft says nothing back, and something passes between you anyway that does not have a ceremony or a citation or a formal name. You drove past an air show on the way to the base this morning. There was a 16-year-old in the bleachers with his mouth open and his head tilted back and a jet passing overhead so fast the eye could barely track it. You saw him. You recognized him completely. Not because you remember being him, although you do. Because you never stopped being him. Because the person who sat in those bleachers with his chest compressed and his breath gone is the same person who just landed that F-16 for the last time. And everything that happened between those two moments was not a transformation, but an accumulation. Each flight adding something that the next flight needed. Each year building something the decade required. Each loss teaching something that no training syllabus could have covered. You said nothing to the boy in the bleachers. You drove past and you watched him, and you felt something move in your chest that was a memory and a recognition and a form of gratitude all at once. And you said nothing because there is nothing to say that would prepare him, and nothing to say that would stop him, and nothing that needed to be said at all. The sky will teach him what it taught you in the only language it speaks, which is consequence and altitude and speed, and the specific silence of a cockpit at 40,000 feet, where you are closer to the stars than to anything human. And it is the loneliest and best place you have ever been. Tonight, somewhere, a 16-year-old is staring at a poster on their bedroom wall, and the poster is asking the same question it has always asked. They have already answered it. They answered it before they put it on the wall. The cycle continues.